I'm so glad that we're finally having a conversation about this again. You know, too often our narrative's set, the majority of the population simply just buys it and runs with it, and then the media circus, the news cycle, moves away, and it's simply a story of the past forgotten in time. Well, you know, maybe sometimes it's a good idea that we revisit things, that we go back a little bit and ask ourselves a very important question: did we get it right? Because in some cases, the ramifications can be pretty extreme. And in this case, we're talking about people's lives. One man, Derek Chauvin, was pretty much sent away for life, with one other officer who was simply present on the scene during the day being sentenced to 5 years alongside him. Maybe, just maybe, we should be asking questions: did we get it right? Tucker Carlson, with his latest segment on X, asks that exact question. Let's take a look and have a conversation. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so Tucker Carlson breaks the internet, reviving the topic.
It could be time to revisit some of the other slogans we've been assured are true and ordered to repeat. Are they in fact true? Did, for example, a racist white cop actually murder a man called George Floyd, a civil rights leader, in Minneapolis on Memorial Day of 2020? Now, we've been told that happened, told it relentlessly for more than 3 years. So at this point, we've been told it so much that pretty much everybody seems to believe it. And because everyone does kind of believe it, a small group of people has been allowed to make massive changes to American society. They include, but are not limited to, decriminalizing stealing, defunding the police, adding a new federal holiday to the calendar called Juneteenth, the ceasing of hiring all white men in corporate America, and of course, significantly, they also sent a cop called Derek Chauvin to prison for more than 40 years. He would be the racist white devil who murdered George Floyd. But the question is, did he actually murder George Floyd? And the answer is, well, no, he didn't murder George Floyd. And we're not guessing about that. We know it conclusively thanks to a new court case now underway in Hennepin County, Minnesota. The case was brought by a prosecutor there called Amy Sweezy. She's suing her boss. So the case is not actually about George Floyd or Derek Chauvin, but it tells you an awful lot about both of them. In her deposition, which you should read, Amy Sweezy describes a conversation that she had with the county medical examiner, Andrew Baker, right after George Floyd died. Quote, "I called Dr. Baker early that morning to tell him about the case and to ask him if he would perform the autopsy on Mr. Floyd." Sweezy recalls all this under oath in the deposition. Quote, "He called me later in the day on that Tuesday, and he told me that there were no medical findings that showed any injury to the vital structures of Mr. Floyd's neck. There were no medical indications of asphyxia or strangulation." Oh. In other words, George Floyd, according to the official autopsy, was not murdered. He died instead of what we used to call natural causes, which in his case would include decades of drug use, as well as the fatal concentration of fentanyl that was in his system on his final day. So this was not a killing. It was yet another narcotics OD in a country that records more than 100,000 of them every year. The medical examiner clearly understood that and in fact articulated it. And Sweezy explains. "He said to me," she recalls in the deposition, "Amy, what happens when the actual evidence doesn't match up with the public narrative that everyone's already decided on?" And then he said, quote, "This is the kind of case that ends careers." In other words, everyone lied about it from the very beginning. The people who knew the truth hid the truth and allowed the revolution to proceed. Now they've been exposed. Now we know the truth. What happens next? Well, they're going to ignore it. The Biden administration just issued a long purple statement celebrating George Floyd's birthday. He's a martyr, despite the fact we know that he was not murdered. And by the way, Derek Chauvin is still languishing in jail for the rest of his life.
Why is it always and only Tucker who seems to be the only one with the balls to ask these kinds of questions? Every other mainstream drone continues to remain silent. It's an absolute disgrace considering somebody's life is on the line. Somebody who is possibly innocent. And yes, that is a real concern. That's not a conspiracy theory. I'm not making that statement because I'm a racist. Not at all. It's just that, you know, this document kind of exists. This is an official George Floyd autopsy. Quote, "No life-threatening injuries identified. No facial, oral mucosal, or, I'm gonna butcher this, conjunctival petechiae. Please don't laugh at me, I didn't go to med school. No injuries of anterior muscles of neck or laryngeal structures. No scalp soft tissue skull or brain injuries, no chest wall soft tissue injuries, rib fractures, other than a single rib fracture from CPR, vertebral column injuries, or visceral injuries, incision and subcutaneous dissection of posterior and lateral neck, shoulders, back, flanks, and buttocks negative for occult trauma. Then on the toxicology report, blood, drug, and novel psychoactive substances screen. Fentanyl, 11 nanograms per milliliter, norfentanyl, 5.6 nanograms per milliliter, as well as 19 nanograms per milliliters of methamphetamine. The guy was literally on a deadly fentanyl dose, a deathly cocktail of substances. Based on very basic research, you'll find this exact number online everywhere. Quote, the estimated lethal dose of fentanyl in humans is 2 milligrams. George Floyd had 5 times the average lethal dose in his system. And anybody who understands what a fentanyl or an opiate overdose is, you essentially stop breathing and die of suffocation. You know, shouldn't we be asking these questions? Shouldn't we be a little bit curious? Now, of course, there were 2 conflicting autopsies, but again, shouldn't we be asking the question, where did this come from? Why was one autopsy prioritized over the other? And just considering the fact that this guy had 11 nanograms of fentanyl in his bloodstream, just based on that alone, don't you think that there's a little bit of doubt as to what was the actual cause of this individual's demise? It's not like I have a horse in this race. It's not like I have any personal interest or personal connection to Derek Chauvin or the individuals around him, but I just can't seem to understand, considering all the facts that came to light regarding this case, not to mention the video evidence, which spawns so many other questions, like the placement of Derek Chauvin's knee. It never actually seemed like his knee was ever on George Floyd's neck, but rather on his back or his shoulder blade. Some of the quotes and some of the things that George Floyd was saying before Derek Chauvin even had him on the ground. You know, major question marks, major issues that bring in a whole lot of confusion. I don't understand, considering everything that we saw, and considering this deadly cocktail of extremely powerful substances, how a jury could have possibly come to a unanimous decision in reaching a verdict of guilty in this case. Intentional homicide, as if the intention was to take his life. Not manslaughter, but rather murder. It's incredibly confusing. And again, the point that I was making is that I don't have a personal connection to Derek Chauvin, but I do have a personal connection to, I don't know, the truth? Or not finding somebody guilty and sending them essentially to life in prison when there's such a major red flag in the case. Just the fact that George Floyd had fentanyl in his system in the first place, in my opinion, is enough to throw the facts of this case in the air entirely. And I think about this case constantly. In fact, not too long ago, maybe a week and a half ago, I tweeted this. I released this on the 12th of October. I still can't wrap my head around the whole George Floyd thing. This was before Tucker Carlson's X segment. I think about it all the time, and it's confusing to me why other people don't. Politics and narrative farming, in this particular instance, seems to have taken precedence above basic curiosity for the truth. That's what I find so odd. You know, it's not a political stance. It's a simple question. Did we get this one right? Or is it possible that an innocent man is now rotting behind bars unjustly for the sole purpose of supposed police reform and demonizing police officers trying to do their job? Well, like usual on videos like this, I'm curious what your opinion is. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you feel like it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.